Hey everyone, it's Hailey, and today I'm going to be doing my October wrap-up. So I had a really great reading month once again in October. I had a fabulous reading month in September. I don't really remember how August went. I feel like it was fine, but once again, great reading month. So I ended up reading a total of 15 books this month, and the funny thing is that in the past, I feel like couple of weeks, at least the past week, I've really slowed down with my reading. I've kind of stopped and been focusing on preparing for NaNoWriMo, which starts tomorrow when I'm filming this, because I'm filming this on Halloween. Happy Halloween. But it will have already started by the time you are seeing this. So right now I'm in a mad dash to get some stuff like filmed and edited so then I can just write. But if you guys wanted to watch my reading as it happens, I do reading vlogs every week, so I will link my weekly reading vlogs down below for you guys. But I have tons of books to talk about today, so let's just get into it. So the first book that I read this month was The Walled City by Ryan Graudin. This follows a walled city basically. It's based on an actual city that existed, and within the walled city, it's not a very great place to live. There's tons of crime and just terrible things that are happening, and it follows the perspectives of 3 children who are in this city. I ended up listening to the audiobook for this one, and I did really enjoy it. It's very different. This was really brutal and intense in a way that you don't normally see in YA, which was kind of refreshing in an odd way. There were some things that literally made me just cringe with how terrible it was. It like makes my skin crawl even thinking about it. And I think this was a perfect pick for October because it was honestly terrifying. All the things that were going on in this city and seeing these people trying to fight against it and fight for their lives every single day. It was just heartbreaking and such an intense story. So I ended up giving this a 3.75 out of 5 stars. Yes, I'm getting that specific. The next book that I read is The Language of Thorns by Leigh Bardugo, and oh my god, I loved this so much. So I feel like you guys know by now that I'm a huge fan of Leigh Bardugo. I think she's amazing. Her writing is just incredible, and usually what I really like about her writing is the group dynamics and everything, and since this is a set of fairy tales that are about the Grisha universe where her other stories take place, it's fairy tales, so you're not really going to get that group dynamic like you get in her other stories, but she is perfect for fairy tales and like short, creepy, dark, poignant stories. I just could not get enough of this story, and especially the illustrations in here are amazing because they build over the pages until you get to the final illustration, which I think is just incredible. So you get 6 fairy tales in here, and all of them really have a different inspiration from a fairy tale that is very well known, and I thought it was so cool trying to figure out which fairy tale belonged with her fairy tales. That was like half of the fun of it all. But all of these fairy tales except for one, I would give a 5 out of 5 stars. The one that I would give closer to a 4 out of 5 stars is The Little Knife. I found it a little bit boring. In order from least favorite to favorite, we have Little Knife, When Water Sang Fire, Ayama and the Thornwood, The Witch of Duva, The Soldier Prince, and The Too Clever Fox was my favorite. And really, it is a toss-up between The Soldier Prince and The Too Clever Fox. But this was honestly so good. You just need to pick it up. Next up, I read A Shadow Bright and Burning by Jessica Cluess. This was definitely a disappointment for me. I thought it was going to be something that I would really enjoy because it deals with like witchcraft and sorcery in the Victorian era, which just sounds amazing and like everything that I would love, but I just didn't find myself engaging with the story or the characters. I couldn't help but be reminded of a lot of other books while I was reading this, and I don't think that's where my problem lies with this story. It didn't have the development that I was looking for. I did love the fact that it was a twist on the Chosen One story and it dealt with magic in the Victorian era. I thought that all seemed so cool, but it just ended up falling a little bit flat for me. So I ended up giving this a 2.5 out of 5 stars, maybe a 2.75. Next up, I read Daughter of the Burning City by Amanda Foody. I ended up revisiting the audiobook for this one actually. I listened to it at a much slower speed, which definitely worked a lot better for me, and I ended up really liking this story. It's set in this very dark and creepy traveling circus, so it's perfect for this time of year, and it follows this girl who has the power to make illusions, and her illusions are so lifelike that they are starting to get murdered. So this is basically a murder mystery about ghosts, or illusions as they're called, but like it's basically ghosts. universe. And it's set in a creepy circus. Like, what more could you want? The world of this book was just bursting with life, and it was so fascinating to me. This was honestly just such an original story, and one of my favorite circus books that I have ever read, and I really like circus books. I need to read more. So I ended up giving this a 4 out of 5 stars. Next up is A Study in Charlotte by Brittany Cavallaro. This is a retelling of Sherlock Holmes, where the Sherlock character is Charlotte Holmes, so she is a female. And in this story, Sherlock and Watson are actually real people, so it's following the descendants of Sherlock and Watson. And of course they end up coming together and solving murder mysteries, and this was just so much fun. I wasn't expecting to enjoy this as much as I did. I don't know why, like, I thought it would be good, but I didn't expect to have so much fun while reading it. But I really did, and I definitely plan on picking up the sequel because it was just great. I loved trying to figure stuff out. It just read like a Sherlock story, like just like you would expect that to be. So I ended up giving this a 4 out of 5 stars. Next up, I read Stalking Jack the Ripper and Hunting Prince Dracula by Carrie Maniscalco. I actually listened to the audiobooks for these, and I highly recommend the audiobooks because the narrator does a fantastic job with them. But these are the first 2 books in a trilogy that follows our main character Audrey Rose, and Audrey Rose is very passionate about forensic science. So she is working alongside her uncle dissecting bodies, trying to figure out what happened to these people if they were murdered, when Jack the Ripper makes his first kill. And if you guys don't know who Jack the Ripper is, he's like this notorious murderer who was in Victorian England and just did disgusting things. I believe he's really famous because he's like the first instance of a serial killer. But I'm not super into that stuff because it creeps me out, so I don't know, don't quote me on that. This book follows right after this one, but this one is set in Romania. I loved both of these books so much. I definitely was not expecting to like them as much as I did. Really, I just thought they were going to be really romance heavy. I don't know if it's just because of James Patterson's name being on here, and I just felt like it was just going to be kind of a generic story. I really don't know why. I haven't read anything by James Patterson, but it just felt like it would be generic. I have no clue why. But this was such a fascinating and unique story. This is once again great for this time of year, and I loved Audrey Rose. She is such an amazing main character. She's super driven, doesn't let anyone tell her where her place is in Victorian society. She doesn't care that she's a woman. She has an interest in science, and she is going to do whatever she can to learn about it. I loved the setting of Victorian England in this book, and I loved the setting of Romania here. It was just so amazing. I loved the castles and everything. It was great. This is also one of my favorite love interests that I have read about in a really long time. You need to pick up these books. They were so good, and I need the sequel in my life, like, immediately. So I gave both of these a 4.5 out of 5 stars. Next, I picked up Turtles All the Way Down by John Green. I went and got this the day that it came out because I needed it in my life. I'm a huge John Green fan. I love the fact that he writes teens that are intelligent, and I know a lot of people hate that, but teens aren't stupid, and I feel like they're dumbed down a lot in YA. Not every book, obviously, but there's certain books that I'm like, are you serious? And I've honestly read a writing book about writing YA, and it talks about how you need to use like simple terms and everything because teens won't understand it. Oh, made me so mad. But once again, we get those intelligent characters in this story as we follow Asa, and she finds herself hunting down a fugitive billionaire. My dad also read this book actually because we have, since The Fault in Our Stars came out, he got that for me for Christmas, and we read that one together. Like, I read it and then he reads it, and then we did that with Looking for Alaska, and then we did it with like all of John Green's other books. So now we did it again with this one, and it is so nice to have a new John Green book in my hands, and it was amazing, and I know that he really loved it as well. I loved the emotional poignancy of this story, and I really think that John Green hit the nail on the head with his addressing of mental illness, and you could tell that he was speaking from a place of experience. This story deals with OCD, and just the words that he used to describe Asa's struggles with her own mind were so accurate. They just hit home, and I feel like he was able to put into words what everyone who has ever struggled with mental illness has never been able to convey before. I'll admit I was super apprehensive going into this. I love John Green, but I haven't absolutely adored all of his books, so I didn't know where this one would fall, but it was definitely a very pleasant surprise, and it's very different than his other books, so even if you didn't like those, and even if you did, I think you'll really like this one. So I ended up giving this a 5 out of 5 stars, if you couldn't tell. Next, I picked up The Sun and Her Flowers by Rupi Kaur. I don't know how to say her name, and I keep on saying I have to look it up, and I still haven't. Now, I never read Milk and Honey. It just didn't really interest me. I like traditional poetry more so, but then Chapters Indigo ended up surprising me with a copy in my mailbox, so thank you so much to them for sending this to me. And I was doing the Readathon by Zoe 24-hour readathon, so I needed something really quick, so it was perfect. Now, there were poems poems in here that obviously I really enjoyed and I found really spoke to me. I marked them off. There were also poems in here that I didn't really care for. My biggest problem with it was I found that a lot of it was kind of like recycled quotes and ideas that I had kind of heard before but reworded into a poem. And I just think I really prefer traditional poetry. I love William Blake and like Shakespeare and Coleridge and all that stuff. Give me some of that and I'm a happy girl. Now more modern poetry just isn't really my jam, so it kind of depends, but this was like okay. I didn't hate it, I didn't love it, like I liked it. So I ended up giving it a 3 out of 5 stars. Next I picked up This Is Where It Ends by Marika Nijkamp. This book had the potential to be amazing and it's one where it's just like the ball was dropped. This follows 4 students during the 54 minutes of a school shooting. Now what really got me is that I felt like it was kind of forcing romance in here and trying to be just a really romantic story, and not that it wasn't doing justice to the subject matter, but in a way it wasn't. I think this is still a really important book because it sparks conversations about something that is really important, gun control in the States. Even though I live in Canada, I live so close to the US border that it's still something that affects me, and really it affects everyone worldwide. So I do think that it is still worth the read, but I've been told that there are a couple of better books out there that deal with the subject matter that I'm planning on reading. My main problem was you get the perspective of all these different people that have all a relation to the shooter, like somehow they know him, but you don't really get the development of the shooter. And I feel like that was a missed opportunity because you could really get to the root of why is he doing this? Where did it go wrong? Like what happened that sparked this in him? So then you can kind of educate people about what you can do to prevent that. I feel like this is very delicate subject matter and nothing that I say is going to do it justice, and I don't know if I'm getting my point across. I just felt like this could have been a much more educational and poignant story, and it just wasn't. It kind of just was disappointing overall for me. So I gave this a 2 out of 5 stars. Next up, I read Sleepy Hollow by Washington Irving, and I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. It's just kind of a classic horror story that was really good for a readathon. And it was really cool to read the origin story to a pop culture icon that is so iconic, which once again happened with Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, which is the next book that I read. I gave this also a 4 out of 5 stars, though I think it is kind of closer to a 5 because I really enjoyed this. Frankenstein's monster, I feel like, is one of the most iconic, if not the most iconic, monstrous figure in pop culture in general. And I actually read this and then watched some different things on it, like read some essays, watched some analysis. I loved it. It really brought me back to being an English major because I feel like I'm going through withdrawals of not like reading stuff to analyze it. So reading those things after reading this really changed my perspective on the story and made me love it much more than I was initially. It's not that I wasn't enjoying it, it just really brought to light some things that I wasn't considering. I love the fact that this is really a story about who is the monster. Frankenstein's monster, or is Frankenstein the monster? Like, I think that's just mind-blowing. Next, I picked up The Midnight Dance by Nikki Katz, which I gave a 1 out of 5 stars because this was so uncomfortable. I really didn't like it. It's like this thriller mystery thing that's set in a ballet school in Italy, but the setting doesn't really come into play because if the setting did, it would have been amazing. I feel like having like a thriller set in a ballet school sounds so cool, especially a ballet school in Italy, but it just didn't matter and it was just weird and it made me really uncomfortable, so I want to stop talking about it because no. And I'm so sad because it's a beautiful book and the finished copy is even more beautiful, so disappointment. Next, I finished The Becoming of Noah Shaw by Michelle Hodkin, which is the first book in a companion trilogy to the Mara Dyer trilogy. Couldn't think of what it was called. This, once again, was kind of a disappointment. Not a lot happened in the story, and I felt like there were moments where a lot of cheap jokes were made that weren't necessary and just kind of made me uncomfortable. And I think it was Books and Lala who said that it was like fan fiction, but like bad fan fiction, and when she said fan fiction, I couldn't get it out of my head, especially when there's a sex scene in like the first, I don't even know, 30 pages or so. So I was just like cringing kind of the whole time. I didn't like hate it. It was a super quick read, which was good, but I gave it like a 2.5 out of 5 stars, maybe. The final book that I read I actually don't have on me, and that is The Hazelwood by Melissa Albert. This is an arc that is coming out in January, so it is the first book that I've read that's coming out in 2018. And if this is any indicator, 2018 is going to be a great reading year. The Hazelwood is honestly, I know I've been saying it about a lot of the books that I read this month, but it is the absolute perfect book for Halloween. I feel like you can honestly only read it when it's raining and dark outside and it's windy and just it's creepy atmosphere. That's the only time you can read it. So The Hazelwood follows Alice, and Alice's grandmother has written these fairy tales, and she has like a small but very dedicated following because of the fairy tales that she has written. But she's never actually met her grandmother. Her grandmother lives on the Hazelwood, which is like this big estate. So she lives with her mother Ella, but her mother Ella ends up disappearing, and she ends up going and trying to find her, and she ends up having to go to the Hazelwood to do so. This was super creepy and dark and weird, and it took me so long to kind of like wrap my mind around how I felt about it because it was so twisted, but it was honestly amazing. Like, just such a cool story, such a cool concept, and I feel like it was really given the justice that it deserved. Honestly, I can't wait for this book to come out so then you guys can read it, because I really want to know what other people think about it, because I was just like mind blown by it. So I give it a 4.5 out of 5 stars all in all. I was torn between that and a 5, and I still don't really know because it got me thinking, and I can't stop thinking about it. It was just so good. So those are all of the books that I read in October. Like I said, I had a really good reading month. I read some books that really surprised me with how much I liked them, and I read some books that really disappointed me with how much I didn't like them. But that's bound to happen, and I love being surprised by books. That's like my favorite. I don't like being disappointed by books, but I love being surprised by books, and I had tons of surprises this month. I also feel like I really read outside of my comfort zone this month, since I don't really like mysteries and thrillers and stuff, but because it was October, I was like, give me all the thrillers, and that's like all I read. And I ended up really liking a lot of them. Not necessarily the thrillers, more so the mysteries, but I ended up really enjoying them. So who knows, maybe I'll read more, but I feel like it was just because of like the vibes outside. It was like cold and blustery and stuff, so I felt like I had to read that kind of stuff, like kind of the like subtly creepy, because I'm a chicken. I can't do horror or anything like that. Hello, editing Hailey here from the future. Future where we don't wear makeup and we just have our hair on top of our head because we are just editing. Very different from filming Hailey. But I just wanted to let you guys know that I'm going to be changing the way that I do wrap-ups. So I feel like last year a lot of people stopped doing monthly wrap-ups and they started doing just like periodic wrap-ups, and I'm going to start doing that as well. The reason for that is that I'm not doing individual reviews anymore, so I'm going to use these mini wrap-ups as mini reviews. There's a lot of books that I would like to give you more in-depth thoughts on, but I can't do that in a wrap-up because a lot of times I will have read quite a few books in a month and I'm not able to really go into depth about them. So I haven't really figured out yet if I'm going to do it by genre, if I'm going to do it after reading so many books. I don't really know what I'm going to do yet. However, I will still have the end of the month wrap-up, but it is going to be talking about different things. So it's going to be just showing you guys the titles that I read, not telling you a lot of thoughts on them, just telling you the ratings that I gave them. It will be kind of like a breakdown more so of what I read. I feel like it'll kind of make sense once I actually do it. So now let's get back to my actual outro. But let me know what you read in October, or if you have read any of these books, your thoughts on them. And don't forget to subscribe. I put out new videos every Monday and Thursday, and also turn on notifications so then you will not miss any of my videos. You can also follow me on social media. My Twitter is at @HailesandBookland, and then I also have an Instagram or Bookstagram, which is at HaileyandBookland. So thank you guys so much for watching today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!